I got to tell you, Dave, one of the most awesome things I've heard in the last few weeks is that you, Dave Jackson, are going to be roasted at Podfest in February.
Yeah, I said, I have too much self-esteem. How can I get humiliated by my friends in public? I know. Yeah, so that'll be interesting. It's one of those things where I've had people go, "Why are you doing that?" I'm like, "Because Chris asked me," and I was like, "Okay." I mean, how many times you get to get roasted? But it's kind of like, I don't know. We'll see. It's either going to go really good or really bad. So that should be fun.
Sorry, I was removing my sweatshirt, which I often have to do when I start this show because, I don't know, I just get warm or something. But you know what? During your roast, it is totally possible that the people trying to roast you will make bigger fools of themselves than they do of you.
That could be. We could have a series of people who aren't that funny trying to be funny. So that could be interesting.
I can't wait. Let's do this.
You're going to need
a
couple of horses or a couple of mules.
That's not the clip we start with. Barry, Barry, calm down,
Barry
man.
been hitting he's still on eggnog, man.
This is better. Let's do it! Yes! Oh my goodness gracious. I was about to say OMG, but then I'm like, that's a little bit 13-year-old girlish. But anyway, same thing. Welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. I'm glad you're here. My name is Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for mid to large size companies. And I also run the Podcast Engineering School, which I love. And every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter, except for this week when we're going to be, this is like the first non-technical episode that we're going to have. But it's going to be good and relevant. Right, Dave?
Absolutely, especially going into the new year.
That's right. So we're going to talk about all the personal aspects of podcast production. And I'll go over that in a second, but just want to let you know, I have a background in audio engineering in the music business. And when I entered podcasting about 6 years ago, I realized that not a lot of people have the audio fundamental knowledge that's needed to really produce good audio. So that's why I started producing podcasts for other people and why I started the school. And if you implement the best of what you learn on this show, your podcast will sound a lot better and you'll produce them in less time, which is actually something we're going to talk about today. Is the time aspect, a lot of that stuff. So Barry, of course, is here with me. He's the maintenance guy in my old building. He just hangs out with me on the show. Barry, what are we going to need to, have a good episode with Dave Jackson? See, I said episode. What are we going to need to have a good session with Dave Jackson and really, really, bring in the new year?
You're going to need a couple of horses or a couple of mules.
It just never gets old. Anything else, Barry?
Monkeys, pumas. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk. First of all, Dave Jackson is here. Yes, you heard that correctly. The Dave Jackson, the podcast consultant, the podcast coach, the owner of School of Podcasting. Go to schoolofpodcasting.com and listen to his show. Your show's called School of Podcasting. And you also host a bunch of other shows, Dave. What other shows do you do again?
I do Ask the Podcast Coach is a live call-in show on Saturday morning. I do that with Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. I do the podcast review show. So if you have a podcast and you want an honest opinion from someone not named Mom, you can go over to podcastreviewshow.com. I do that with Eric K. Johnson, who is known as the Podcast Talent Coach. And I started a new one as it was kind of a gag kind of thing. I was testing a new service. It's called the Podcast Rodeo Show, where I grab a random podcast and see how long I can hang on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's at podcastrodeoshow.com. That's kind of, I had one yesterday where this person had this super professional intro, welcome to the something show. Here's your host so-and-so. And she came on and she sounded like she was on a phone underwater. And I was like, not going to happen. So it's a fun show. And I literally I was going to do like 10 episodes and then people started listening and they're like, no, please keep this going. It's hilarious. So it's a lot of fun.
So you listen in real time and sort of comment in real time?
Yeah, it's me. I go grab an episode. It's an honest to goodness. I've never heard the show before, first impression. And as it goes on, I just spew what's in my head. And then at the end, I try to be a little more constructive if it's something where I think they need some work.
Okay.
Because it doesn't do any good to just go, well, that sucked. It's like, okay, how do you fix that sucked? It's like, but if I say your audio was a little too low, or, what is the purpose of having music for no apparent reason, or, whatever. And it's all my opinion. And there's even a disclaimer there. It's like, the following is an opinion. It's only an opinion. If you don't like it, don't listen again. So.
Right. That's life right there.
That's it.
So you were on this show, the Podcast Engineering Show, way back in May of 2016. So about a year and a half ago. It was session number 11, Dave Jackson. And so if you're listening to this, in that session, we went over Dave's audio setup. We went over his mic and his signal flow and his workflow and all that stuff and his processing. And so we're not going to cover all that in this session, obviously. So you can go back to session 11 and hear all that. But Dave, are you today speaking into your RE320?
Yes, I'm going RE320 into an H5 as a audio interface.
Got it. And you're also recording this as a double ender. And how are you recording it?
I'm recording this in Hindenburg Journalist. You go into track 1 and say, in this case, listen to the H5. And then if you have Hindenburg, it's the pro thing. You have an option on track 2 to say, listen to other applications, which in this case is you.
Right.
So, and then you hit record and off it goes. And then the only thing that's kind of weird is, like, right now I need to turn you down. So I have to turn down the volume of like the little speaker in the bottom right-hand corner on a PC. Because there's no way to adjust the volume in Hindenburg. It's just maxed out automatically, and there's nothing you can do about that. So you have to kind of use your PC as a mixer in this case.
Got it. So when you're hearing me too loud in your headphones, so you got to turn down the overall volume from your computer. Yeah, that's interesting in Hindenburg Journalist, and I'm assuming it's Hindenburg Journalist Pro, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it makes sense that if it's taking system audio, it's just taking the system audio, so it's not raising or lowering it. It's whatever it is, it just takes it, right?
Right. And then the fun thing is, every time I adjust the volume on the PC, I haven't figured out how to turn that off. It has that stupid Windows bring, letting me know that I've changed the volume. So that'll be some fun editing later.
All right. Well, what we're going to talk about in this session is really important stuff. This is all the personal stuff behind podcast production. So if you're a podcaster or a podcast producer, you're obviously recording audio and editing audio and producing episodes. But some of what we're going to cover is, like, what time of day or night do you get the most work done? Also, getting work done in terms of finishing episodes versus experimenting with new gear and new plugins and new stuff. Family considerations, right? I mean, if you're working from home, you got your family there, and that impacts your work. Working on your business versus producing the actual audio. So if you're an editor and you're looking for more work, you got to go out there and get more work, but you also have to edit the audio for your current clients. So how do you balance that? I'm going to ask Dave the latest he's ever stayed up producing a podcast episode and what Dave drinks during recordings. I'll ask you that now, Dave. What do you drink?
I just drink water. I used to drink mammoth amounts of Mountain Dew. Literally, I would drink like a 6-pack a day. It was just ridiculous. And I wanted to lose some weight, and plus my blood pressure was through the roof. And so it took a while. It was literally like an addiction. I finally kicked the Mountain Dew habit. So now I drink water, and occasionally I will throw in some almond milk and make a smoothie. But I'm pretty much water all the time now.
And when you drank the Mountain Dew, did you ever have to burp when you're on the air, when you're on the mic?
You have two things. You have the burping, and then you have lip smacking galore because your lips are sticky. Because all the sugar. So
Barry, what do you think about that situation?
Senseless.
All right. Well, pretty clear-cut answer. All right, and then we're going to talk about some other things as well. But before we do, you're going to be tonight, and obviously this is about 2 weeks before this session comes out. You're going to be on the Podcasters Roundtable with Ray Ortega and Daniel J. Lewis talking about audio quality, good versus good enough. And
Yes.
I just want to state, and you all know my opinion probably, but I'm going to state my opinion on the subject, because I can imagine that a lot of people would point at me and point at Podcast Engineering School and say that Chris Curran thinks that you have to have, tremendous, awesome audio quality. And I don't feel that way. You know that. I think good enough is fine for the average person. And obviously, but it all comes down to listener experience, right? If the listener can listen and not be distracted by bad audio, then that's fine. However, I will say, when it comes to producing audio for companies, and when you're actually working for a big company and they're paying you, $500, $800 per episode, or $1,000 an episode, they want it to sound good. That's why they're hiring a professional. So in that case, it's probably makes sense to strive for, even great sounding audio. Right, Dave? Do you agree?
Absolutely. Oh, dude, you're preaching to the choir here. I'm with you. The minute that your sound distracts from what you're saying, because either A, I have to grab the volume knob, or B, it sounds like you're frying bacon underwater, it's just not going to work for me. I remember I used to listen to one called, it was Barry Katz. I forget the name of it. He's a famous comedian manager. He's managed everybody. And they would literally have him and his guests would sit on a couch. And it was always the case that the guest would forget they're holding a microphone. So they would have it way, way down. And whoever was their engineer at the time didn't do any kind of leveling of the volume. So you would turn it up because you want to hear what the guest says. And then Barry would come in and literally just blow the windows out of your car. So it was always fun.
Right, that is. And I just saw a post on Facebook, too. It's somebody who had been producing their own show, and they're trying to make their audio sound better. And then they said that now when they go listen to other podcasts, they find themselves critiquing the audio and quite often being frustrated by the quality of audio. And it's like, dude, welcome to the club. I mean, if you,
that's it.
Even if you aren't frustrated consciously by bad audio, subconsciously it is frustrating, right?
Yes. Oh, very much so. I remember when I first started, I kept picking up the sound of my fan. And what was funny about that is I'm in a quiet room, I'm smushing my headphones into my head, and I'm like, okay, I can definitely hear that. Well, part of that, I was hearing it because I was in the room with the fan. So even if the fan wasn't in the recording, I would still hear it. And I would talk about it on my show, and finally one of my listeners just emailed me and said, Dave, I can't hear what you're talking about, and I really wish you would move on.
Wow.
So, and I've done that because I remember I did that probably a couple years ago. And I said, I'm sure you guys hear that. And I said, here, I'll just be quiet, and you'll hear it. So there's this empty space for like 5 seconds. Well, I was listening back to that episode in the car, and I'm like, nobody can hear that. So we obsess over that. And that's something I always kind of remind people. It's like, you're now listening through the ears of a podcaster, and that's different than somebody who's not a podcaster.
Right. So let's get into this. What time of day or night do you get the most work done? And I think this comes down to, some people are morning people, some people are night owls, right? And I will say, Dave and I are not women, and we don't have children. I don't think you don't live with children, do you, Dave?
No, just a cat.
So I'm saying, like, if you're a female and you have kids, like,
right.
I mean, obviously, we'd like to hear your input, so maybe you could comment on this post or this session. But we're going to talk about as much as we can regarding this kind of stuff, but we know we're not covering all the bases, so definitely chime in. I know I have students from the Podcast Engineering School, graduates, who are producing audio, and they have kids and families, and for a woman who's cooking all the meals and taking care of the kids, there's probably a different answer. Like, when do you get the most work done? It's probably when the kids are asleep, right, Dave?
Right. Yeah. I know a lot of people, they get things done. They wait for the family to go to bed because A, it's quiet, and you can just jump on it, and that's the good thing. The bad news is that's when you look over the clock and go, it's 2:15 already.
Oh, so what about you? Are you a morning person or a night person?
I can do either, but I'm definitely more. To me, it's like post dinner, like 7:30. I could watch really bad TV. I could go to the gym, or I can go upstairs and podcast. So for me, it's about 8 o'clock on. Like last night, I was in heaven. I was editing audio, working on a website, and then I Thursday Night Football on a computer screen. So it was like the best of both worlds. I was multitasking, which is another fallacy, by the way. If you think you can do, two things at once, you actually can't. But I was kind of just playing with a website. So for me, I start about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock on, and then I usually wrap up around, if I'm going to be smart, I'll go to bed about midnight. If I'm not going to be smart, I'm typing show notes at 2 in the morning, and that's just a really bad idea.
Wow. Yeah, that's late.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you said about when you're working on a website, you can listen to the football game or, you can even listen to music. But when you're editing audio, you can't listen to music.
No, that doesn't work.
Or watch football. But sometimes I want to. Sometimes I'll be editing a show. Like people know that most of my clients, I'm on the call during the recording. So I'm literally listening and making editing notes while it's being recorded. So when it comes to editing and doing post-production, I already know what they said. Like I don't have to listen and I know where the edits are. So, but still I can't listen or do anything else because you have to listen. I mean, you have to listen to what you're doing, obviously.
Yeah, so like last night I had the sound off on the football game and I'm doing this stuff on a website, but you're still every now and then glancing over to see what the score is and see what's going on, and your attention is just getting obliterated, over these multiple things you're trying to do. Whereas if you and that's what I used to do. I used to only do podcasting stuff on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and I put all my notes in Evernote, and when I would go in to do stuff, I would turn off Facebook, turn off email, silence my phone, and I would just podcast. And that's how I really, really used to get a ton of stuff done. And I'm on a different schedule now, so I can kind of be a little more lax. I don't have to be quite so laser focused. But on the other hand, I could probably get more things done if I would go back to that. But that's it's just one of those fallacies. If you think you can multitask, you're really not gaining any ground.
Got it. And I know recently you were out of town at a conference. I think it was PodCon, and I sort of got this impression from social media that you normally put out a show on Mondays, but you were coming home. Was it late? You were coming home on a Monday, so you had to stay up late to finish the episode or something?
Yeah, it's a really bad idea. I tell everybody it's one of those do as I say, not as I do. And I always say have some sort of evergreen content in the can that you can use. And so originally I was gonna post it ahead of time, and it didn't dawn on me until I landed in Seattle. Oh, you never did that thing where you're gonna make an episode, and because it usually goes out Sunday at midnight, which is basically first thing Monday.
Right.
And so instead, I got home Monday at like 10:15, and it's kind of stupid in a way because part of me is like, I don't want to miss my Monday streak. I haven't missed, publishing on a Monday for 595 episodes. I got to get this out, which is stupid because in the end, your audience wants a good episode, not an episode that's on time.
Right.
So I went ahead and did that, but I was typing show notes at 2 a.m, and I have Grammarly, which is this cool tool that's kind of like a spell checker on steroids, and usually it catches all the really obvious stuff that's stupid. And it was one of those where you go to bed, you wake up the next day, and you look at your show notes, and you're like, did somebody else type these? These are horrible. They did, like, it was a point, because what I had done is I had typed my show notes on my iPad in Evernote. And you know how your iPad will autocorrect everything. So it was just filled with autocorrections that made no sense at all. And I was just like, why did I not catch these? I'm like, because it was 2 a.m, and you were now, not only were you tired, you were jet lagged. And it's like, so yeah, I don't recommend that at all.
So did your episode actually go out on Monday, or was it early Tuesday?
No, it did. I'd have to go back and look, but I got it in just under the wire. But that's where I posted it with like half the show notes, and then so it would go out, and then I was fixing the show notes as time was going on.
There you go. Keep the streak alive. Come on.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I so that's interesting you say that, in the evening, like after dinner, 7:30 or 8 o'clock, you feel like that's a good time to work on stuff. I also feel that too. It's like, I work all day pretty much. I mean, I don't get up really, really early, but I just, work a normal day as an entrepreneur who, owns a business and works from home. And then, but it's like after dinner, maybe between 7:30 or 8 and 11 or midnight, I also feel like that's the time when I can get a lot done. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because, not as many emails are coming in, or, I'm not checking social media, maybe that's why. Did you ever wake up really early in the morning to do stuff?
I've tried that. I'll get up at like 5 and do something between like 5 and 7. and I'm just not as sharp. It's weird. I can go to the gym. I've done that because that doesn't require any thinking. It's just you walking and grunting and sweating. But anything that requires me to kind of think or be creative, that's it, really. My creativity isn't awake yet. It's definitely more awake in the evening.
That's interesting. All right, so let's move on to this aspect. Getting work done, meaning producing audio and finishing episodes, versus experimenting with new gear or new plugins or new websites or new, I think it was about a year ago now, but you switched like teaching platforms, like all your courses, you switched platforms, and it's like, so there is a lot of stuff we have to do just to maintain our businesses and our production, even plugins, you got to update your plugins and I know, a lot of people say find a workflow that works for you and stick with it, right? Obviously, don't change your workflow every week. But at the same time, guys like us, and I think any podcaster, like you get a new piece of gear or you upgrade something, like you gotta play around with it, right? So I know you do a lot of that, right, Dave?
Yeah, it's one of those things that you get something and for me, especially if it's a piece of gear or some sort of plugin or something like that, I have to not only know it to use it, but I also have to know it kind of inside and out so I can teach it. So if somebody goes, well, what if I want to do this? I'm like, oh, well, that'll do it, or something like that. And there are times when you fall into kind of pits, rabbit holes of stuff we were just playing. And then there are other times when you have to do it. Like I have two websites, one of which is the School of Podcasting, that I happen to do something on Google, and I saw where my website came up, and it even says now, your website's not mobile friendly. And I was like, oh, that needs fixed like right now. And so I'm playing with a couple different themes and things like that. And I had another one, another website, davidjackson.org, because I'm not cool enough to own the .com. And and the guy that owns it has said, please, I'm going to I've harassed that guy to death. He's like, I'm not selling it ever. I don't care what the thing is. I'm not selling it. And it had an old theme that was super popular called Avada. I think it was AVADA. And it's a little different because most themes, when they update, will let you know, hey, we have a new version, click here to update. And for whatever reason, this one didn't. And I was using another tool and it said, hey, your website's like ripe to get hacked because you have this really old theme on it. So last night I was, that's the website I was working on. And I was, finding new themes and playing with something from Elegant Themes called Extra. And then it's one of those things. The good news is it does everything. The bad news is it does everything. So you have to I'm watching these YouTube clips at like 1.5 speed to try to get through it to get this stuff. So yeah, so that's usually, there are times when you have to do stuff. And then like I did a thing this year that I don't think I'll do anymore. I spent a lot of time looking at podcast media hosting because a bunch of them just came out of the wall.
Right. And
it's kind of stupid because I'm trying to see if this, I guess it's something that I would say, hey, I already have 4 that I recommend. Libsyn Blueberry, Podbean's okay, Spreaker's okay. But what am I going to add another one to that list? Or you could use, Jim's, media hosting. So I'm going to quit doing that because I spent hours going, I don't like these guys. They're not as good. They're not going to be anywhere near the other 4 people that have had, 12 years in podcasting in some cases. So that was just something I was kind of doing, how did I do this year? And I was like, well, I spent a lot of time spending hours on stuff that I go, yep, just what I thought. This isn't any good. So I'm not doing that anymore this year.
Yeah, there's so much to do. And I find like every time, well, not every time. I mean, I've switched microphones maybe. Well, I've been in the podcasting space for about 6 years. I've probably switched microphones like 2 or 3 times. And every time I get a new mic, I literally have to plug it in because I have a channel strip and I literally sound check myself. And it takes me at least an hour, maybe 2 hours. Like I'll just go back and forth. I'll adjusting EQ and I'll, everything. And how close do I get to the mic and what windscreen should I use and stuff like, I mean, I know the average person doesn't do that, but I do that because I want to learn this mic and I want to make sure the mic sounds good. The other area that I spend a lot of time in is obviously plugins and mixing. It's like, I get new plugins and I want to try them out. Even existing plugins that I use, I want to try them in a little different way or a little different order. Sometimes you can, like for instance with de-essers, instead of just using one de-esser, you can use 2 de-essers in series, but more gently. Use each one more gently, but you know, so it's if you have someone with really loud S's. But you know, I could literally spend a half an hour on one person's voice adjusting de-essers, and you know, and it's not just that I'm making that person sound good. It's that I'm learning how what I think is the best way to use two de-essers in a row and gentle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like adding another tool to your toolbox. Like, oh, now I know this. So
totally,
it is funny. To me, the two that I try to stay away from are YouTube and Facebook, because I can go over to YouTube to find a question on a plugin or some sort of website thing, and the next thing I know, I'm like, why am I watching Ed Grimley videos from Saturday Night Live from 1982? It's like I've just been completely sucked in.
That happens to me too. Oh my goodness. Like 3.5 hours later, it's like, what am I doing?
Yeah. And that's when you look at the clock and go, it can't be 3:30. You know, that's you know. So yeah, it's crazy. So you just have to be kind of go into it with a little bit of awareness of, okay, what I'm doing. And so if I think, you know what, I bet there's a tutorial on this on YouTube. I kind of go in going, okay. It's like going in for shopping. You know, if you're going to the grocery store and you have a list and you're in a hurry, you just keep telling yourself, stick to the list, stick to the list. So for me, it's like, okay, I'm going to go find a tutorial on this particular theme or something like that, and then I'm getting out. So the minute I get my information I need, I'm like, and we're going to close it. Otherwise, it's, you know, more silly videos.
Yeah. Do you experiment with lots of different gear and stuff, like hardware and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff I don't mind. I'm with you. I've played with about every, like I actually bought a Blue Yeti this year because I've always been saying how awful it is. And it is, for the average user, not a great microphone. I always say an asterisk. I'm like, the Blue Yeti is not a bad microphone, asterisk, if you play with it and make sure you're using it properly. But so many people just, you know, turn the thing on, whatever that mode is where it picks up from every direction, and then they talk to it from, you know, across the room. Yeah. And it's like, that is not going to work. So I played with gear. I had I forget the Mix Pre. I forget the name of the company that makes those.
Yeah, Sound Devices. Yeah.
Sound Devices. I had one of those, and that hurt to send that thing back. I was like, oh, I want it to stay. But I there's another piece of gear that I want to play with probably next year. I think it's PreSonus, and it's got a built-in recorder in the mixer. So it's kind of like a Mix Pre in that way, but it looks more like a traditional mixer, except you've got a little place for an SD card. And I was like, ooh, that looks fun.
That is cool. Yeah, I think, who else makes one of those? Oh, it's Zoom. Like Zoom, the H5, H6, the people who make that, they also make like this, I forget what it's called. It's like a little 12-channel mixer, but it records on board, and it's also an interface. Yeah,
and that's just one of those things, again, that you get it, and I've just learned at this point to actually read the manual. I know it's like, what? Are you crazy? But I have found that, you know, you can save yourself a lot of headaches. With the Mix Pre 3 I was trying to figure out how to do a Mix Minus. And I'm going through and I'm watching YouTube videos, and then finally I forget what YouTube video I saw, and it was like, yeah, just the way it's made, it just automatically knows when it's plugged in as a USB device not to send the sound of the computer back to the computer. So it was kind of like, oh, the reason I can't find it is because it does it automatically. And I was like, oh, that would have been nice to see in the manual somewhere. But
yeah, my good friend Mike Helms, who he has the Up to You podcast. He just bought Sound Devices let him try a Mix Pre 6 because he does on location audio for video. He does like TV commercials and stuff, and he's like the audio guy. So he's the grip holding the big pole with the mic on the end of it and stuff.
Nice.
And anyway, he liked the Mix Pre 6 so much that he actually bought a Mix Pre 10T, which is it has 8 XLR inputs, and it's right, and he loves it. He just loves it.
Nice.
So good for you, Mike Helms.
That's right.
And I've invited him on this show like 18 times. And he's like, oh, yeah, okay. Same with Mark Johansson. Those are like the two. Well, Mark Johansson, that's crazy. Ever since I've known him, I'm like, dude, you got to be on my show. And he's like, I'm like, whoa. Yeah. Dude. And a lot of times I'll talk to Mark Johansson on the phone, and literally, we'll spend an hour and a half riffing on gear and stuff. And I'm like, I should just secretly record him and not even tell him.
Yeah.
But that's not right.
He knows I say this with love. There is no such thing as a short conversation with Mark Johansson. And if you get me and him together, we're going to blow through 2 hours easy because, again, we'll be talking gear, and the next thing you know, we're talking about, Beavis and Butthead and Winger videos. So we're all over the place.
Well, Podfest, we're all going to be there. We should hang out. And of course, you and I always talk about that because you play guitar and I'm a drummer, that we should jam or something. And Mark Johansson was a guitar tech.
Yeah. Yeah, he saved my butt last year. I did a thing where Chris asked me to play the guitar in my presentation. And I just said, I need somebody in Florida with a guitar. And then Mark had like a stable of guitars. He's like, which one do you want? So it was very cool.
Nice. All right. So family considerations. So in my home, what it looks like is that I have my studio basement. It's a finished basement with a carpet and stuff, and it's nice. It's good. And I have my table, and I have my mixing desk, and I have everything I need, and I have my drum set, which is half set up, and I'm really grateful to have like a decent sized room where I can have all my stuff. And if I'm really honest with myself, that's pretty much the reason we bought this house because of this basement room and that it looks out into the backyard and there's like a park there. So there's no houses or roads right outside this room. So it's
nice.
Quiet, right? So anyway, this is where I do all my work. And of course, my wife cooks dinner, cooks lunch or whatever, and breakfast. And it's like, sometimes she'll come down and say, hey, dinner's ready. And it's like, sometimes you're in the middle of doing something and maybe you're not that hungry. And it's like, dinner's ready. Okay. And then there's always a dilemma. Like, do I say, can we eat in an hour or like, cause she just made it right now. And you don't want to, how it is. It's just weird. So, but sometimes I'm like in the middle of something, like I'm about to finish a mix. Like I'm just tightening it up and about to render it. And it's like, I got to finish it. And then my wife is chiming in. And I don't know, sometimes, it's never like super frustrating, but it's always sometimes this weird little tug of war between the family and normal life and this mix that I'm about to finish. And I know, like I said before, is like, I know for, anyone who's producing podcasts who has a family with kids and stuff, it must be 10 times worse with kids, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things that it is a weird tug of war because on one hand, you don't feel like you're being disrespectful, but by not coming to dinner when they say dinner's ready, they just spent a half hour cooking and you're just not, you don't seem to care about that. So you don't think you're being disrespectful, but it can definitely be seen that way. And then I know I was famous for like, all right, I'll be there in a minute. And then she would come back again and I'll be like, yeah, I'll be there in a minute. She goes, you said that 15 minutes ago. And I'm like, really? 15 minutes? I'm like, okay, sorry, And family's super important. There are three things you need to podcast that have nothing to do with a microphone. One of them is your health. So if you stay up all late all the time, you're going to probably end up getting sick. You need your attitude, and that's another one. When you don't have any sleep, you get all tired and mopey. And then the third one is your family. And so when you have your family, for lack of a better phrase, going against you because you keep blowing them off, that ruins your attitude. So it really is a mix of those three things that kind of get you on the path to successful podcasting. And for me, my problem was even when I was with my family, I was in like creation mode, or I'd be watching something and I was kind of reverse engineering and going, would that make a good episode? And so it was kind of like I had to learn to really turn off my brain and turn off the podcasting thing. So when I was with people, I was actually with them and not still kind of just, that would be, I could talk about that on the show. And I remember my ex-wife would just look at me and go, is this going to be an episode of Building a Better Dave? And I'm like, it might be. So it's always fun that way. And then like right now, I'm trying to keep him quiet, but I had the door cracked. I thought I had it closed, and my cat has climbed in here, so I'm trying to keep him quiet. So that's another thing you have to keep in mind with kids is I know people that have, they'll put some sort of, sign on the door, or they'll put a tie on the doorknob or something like that. And then it's just one of those things that when you're done, you kind of have to reward kids and say, thank you so much for being quiet while mommy or daddy was in the room, and let's play, Chutes and Ladders now or something or whatever to
right.
kind of try to reward them for that.
Another thing that happens to me is when I'm working, I I lose track of, or I don't even think about food or hunger. Like I don't, like my wife will come and say, "Are you hungry?" And I'm like, literally, probably 80% of the time my wife asks me, "Are you hungry?" I literally don't know, and I don't know what to say, yes or no.
Yeah.
Is that weird? I don't know. It doesn't seem right, but
no, for me, it's, we all talk about creative juices, and when you get your creative juices going and you're like, ooh, I just found the perfect sound effect and this and that and, whatever, and time and space and hunger just go away. You're just in your own little world, and then all of a sudden somebody comes in and pops your bubble, and you're like, hey, it's, dinner's been on the table for 45 minutes. You're like, really? So,
all right,
fun.
Let's talk about working on your business versus in your business. And this is an interesting concept that I learned years ago because, a lot of us are entrepreneurs who produce podcasts. Well, certainly you and I are entrepreneurs. We have businesses in the podcasting industry. The average podcaster, has a day job, right, and does their podcast part-time. But even if you do your podcast part-time, you still need to promote it and get it out there, right? You want more listeners. So in a way, the act of trying to get more listeners is an entrepreneurial act, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's not enough to really making the podcast at times is kind of the easy part. It's getting your audience to listen is like, where are they? I know they're out there somewhere, so we mentioned earlier, I went to Seattle to PodCon, and half the reason I went to that is I looked at the speakers and the people that were there, and it was a podcasting event. I didn't know anybody. And I was like, this is good because I kind of need to get around people who have no clue who I am. So I, say, by the way, there's this thing called the School of Podcasting. You might want to check it out. And just interview. It was really made for listeners. That was the other thing. So I thought the more I understand listeners, the more I can understand how to make content and things like that. So it was more of almost like an expedition to go out and just do research in that point. But, and for me, I always say the best way you can connect with your audience is face-to-face, but we all don't have the ability to, go to all these events and things like that. So if you can't do that, then there's meetup.com. There might be things meeting in your area. And then from there, you get into Facebook groups and, virtual events and things like that. And then eventually you get email. And from there, it's, Twitter and all that other fun stuff. But it's a job trying to find your audience. And then you can't just walk into a room of people. When I first started, I thought I'd found the Holy Grail. And it was because it was before Facebook was really going big. And it was an old forum, and it was for ex-radio DJs. And I'm a guy that wants to teach people how to podcast. And I was like, I found the holy, and I walked in, like, hey, I'm Dave Jackson. I'm from the School of Podcasting. You guys should start up. And literally they banned me in about 4 minutes. They're like, because my first thing out of my mouth just appeared from their standpoint, obviously very accurately, it looked like a bunch of spam. And I was just like, no, you got to do this. So that's the thing. We all just want to walk in and tell everybody about their podcast. Well, you kind of have to make friends with people first so they actually want to hear what you're saying.
Right. And so for people who are producing podcasts, like a lot of listeners of this show are probably producers who are, have a roster of clients. Same thing. You have to spend time dedicated to finding new clients. And that's working on your business. Well, in a way, I guess it could still be working in your business. I guess working on your business technically is like planning and strategizing.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah.
You need to do that too.
Yeah. Well, and we've kind of done that a little bit in this episode. You kind of look at like, okay, that was a waste of time. And then you look at things like, okay, what did work? Like one of the things that I want to start doing, and I learned this at PodCon, is if somebody says, hey, I just found your show, I really like it, I need to say, thank you so much. How did you find my show? Because that will then, if they go, oh, well, I heard you on a podcast, or I saw you in a Facebook group, or whatever it is that they found me, I need to know what that is because I need to do more of that.
Right.
And it sounds simple, but it's like I don't usually ask that question enough. It's like, oh, thank you so much. And then I'll ask like, why did you like it or whatever? But I need to start asking, how did you find me? Because in the end, we all want to be found.
Yeah, I was lucky to work with my brother in our family business, and I was out doing sales, and he was always curious about how people found out about our company, just because of that very reason. Because if everyone is saying, oh, I found you in the Yellow Pages, then you got to keep that Yellow Pages ad going.
Yeah, exactly.
So I do that now. Every potential client I talk to, I literally, as we're talking, it's almost the first question, and it's almost in a very conversational way. It's like, hey, so how did you find me? And it's just great information. So the other thing, if you're a podcast editor or producer and you're looking for more clients, you got to spend time keeping your website up to date and also being active on social, or, at least some social. You don't have to be on everything, but it's really, so Dave, do you personally set dedicated time to market your business, or do you just kind of just do it like all day, every day kind of thing?
Yeah, it kind of comes and goes. Saturday, especially Saturday morning, I go in because I do a show called Ask the Podcast Coach. So I go out to Facebook groups to see what questions people have asked, and then I'll answer those on the show, in addition to if anybody wants to come in and ask a question live in our chat room. So I do a lot of looking there, and while I'm there, I'll actually answer the question. So that's a way to kind of just, flex your muscles, for lack of a better phrase, or at least, provide value to somebody so that they might go, that guy seems to know what he's talking about.
Right.
And there are things like, I'm not as good on Twitter as I should be. I send a lot of stuff out on Twitter, but I don't really have many conversations on Twitter. I'm much better at that on Facebook. I run a local Northeast Ohio podcasters meetup. It's one of those things where people sometimes go, but I'm only getting X amount of people. And that group maybe gets 10 people on a meeting. We meet once a month, but one of those 10 people was able to get me on TV because there was like a local show and they spot like local entrepreneurs and they needed a podcast guru. And he's like, oh, I know somebody. And I got to go on this cool TV show, which was kind of fun. So it's not always, how many people are listening, but who is actually listening. And then I also try to fan the flames of those that are listening. It's one of those things where I could probably spend twice as much effort to get one new listener, or I could kind of make a better connection with the listener I have, and they're more likely than hopefully go out and tell other people about my podcast. So
right.
It's kind of like stoking the fire kind of thing. It's a tough gig any way you slice it, growing your audience. It's just, we all want that giant, to me, I picture like this giant, like 6 foot tall, gold plated like switch, and you flip it up and 10,000 downloads come your way.
Right. And you talking about building audience, and the same thing applies to getting clients. I also feel the same way about my current clients. Like right now, it's, today's, December 15th, I think. I'm basically figuring out what, the holiday message I want to send to my clients, and maybe even a gift. And I usually focus on New Year instead of any religious holiday, because the New Year's common to everybody. But same thing. It's like, if you focus on your current clients and really be appreciative of them, and of course, all my clients, they already know how appreciative I am, but, just little things here and there. It's, the referrals come in over time. You get referrals and they put in a good word for you, and they'll send other people your way. And, word of mouth is always the best way, right?
That's it. That's most people that listen to podcasts or if it's a business, they'll ask their friends, hey, do you know anybody, does anybody know who's your mechanic, or who's your dentist, or,
right.
Does anybody know I need somebody to hang some blah, 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 drywall? Usually ask your friends first.
And it's cool. I don't know if, like, my niece is just getting into podcasts, because we were in the car when she was visiting here a few weeks ago. We were in the car driving like 3 hours, and of course I put on Hardcore History.
Nice.
And she's 14, and kind of in that stage where just looking at her phone and ignoring the world.
Exactly.
But guess what? About 30 minutes in, she's like, what is this? Who is this? And then literally a week ago, this is after she got home, she's like, hey, what was the name of that show, that history show? And
nice.
what's a good podcasting app for Android? So, right? So, and the other thing I've experienced a lot is when you meet someone who listens to podcasts, there's all of a sudden this like commonality. It's like, hey, brother, hey, you're my brother, you're my sister. And it's and literally you pull out your phone, you open your podcast app, and you start going through shows that you're subscribed to and be like, hey, this is a cool one, that's a cool one, right?
Yeah, the whole thing in Seattle, it was called PodCon, and it was geared towards listeners, and that's all these people did. I mean, there's like 1,000 people there, and then I guess there's one called The Adventure Zone, and another one called Welcome to Nightville. So these are kind of audio dramas. And apparently there are characters in these. So it's a little bit like Comic-Con or Dragon Con, where people dress up. And I'm sorry, they don't dress up. They do cosplay. That's the politically correct term. But they were cosplaying, and they had like elf ears and little witches' hats and things like that. But they were all geeking out on podcasting and about their favorite shows. So absolutely. It's that word of mouth thing again.
All right, let's talk about production. I won't call it a nightmare, but I know I've produced some episodes where I thought it was going to take me, 2 hours, but it ended up taking me 6.5 hours. Do you have any stories or anything like that?
Yeah, the reason I was trying to type my show notes on the plane back from Seattle is there are times when, I know what I'm going to talk about. I know what I'm going to talk. It's in my head. I've been thinking about it all day. I know what I'm going to talk about. And the fourth time I go to record it, because for me, I'm just, I don't know, way too ADD. I'll be recording it, and I'll take a little tangent from what's in my head, and then another little tangent, and then all of a sudden you look and you're like, I don't know where I'm at. What am I talking? So I'll scrap that. And so I did that 3 times. Oh. And the fourth time I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. Because you look up and you're like, wait a minute, this is 44 minutes. It's supposed to be like an 18-minute segment. And I've just gone over the place. So that's when I just go, okay, let's write down the bullet points. Let's get them in front of you. So I've just known most of the time, I don't think I'll be stupid enough to go, I'll just wing it. And it's not winging it. It's just, I'm just going to rely on the bullet points in my head. And for me, at least, I'm really horrible at that. So that's one that I don't do anymore.
Wow.
How about you?
Yeah, well, I actually have a story about a show that I started producing about a year and a half ago. And it's the story of the first episode I ever produced for them. And the show's called Macro Voices, and they talk about macroeconomics. Really good show. I mean, really high level, good show. Big name guests and real stuff, not like mainstream media, fake news, and all that. But Macro Voices. So what they did was they would do an hour-long interview in one session, maybe like a day or two before. And then on Thursday afternoons with them, I would meet them at 2 p.m. my time, and they would do like they would do about 30 minutes of commentary, just some general news, but they'd also do commentary about that interview, right? They almost do like a pre and post game. So then after they record that at 2 p.m. on Thursday, they wanted me to literally work on the episode, produce it immediately, and then literally post it. Because in the economics world, they wanted people in the Far East, like Japan, they wanted them to be able to hear it on Friday. So if you posted it early Thursday evening in the U.S., it's already Friday morning in the the Far East. So so I thought we got done at like 3 or 3:30, and they're like, oh, when will you have this done? And I'm like, 5:30. I figured 2 hours, right, of me producing, and literally it took. I think I got done literally around 9 p.m. So what is that?
Ooh.
That's about 5.5 hours. And here's the reason is because there were so many segments and the music fading in and out and announcer clips, like the voiceover clips and stuff. Like it took me a while. What I had to do for that first episode was assemble my entire template in the DAW. So I had to put the music and the announcer voice, then I had to mix the levels of everything, I had to fade everything, then I had to actually edit each individual clip, I had to edit the interview portion. So like that first time, and I misjudged the timing of it, but literally it took so long to assemble this template with all that stuff. But guess what? The great thing is the next week when it came time to produce the episode, I literally used the same template and I just switched out 3 clips. I switched out the interview clip, the pregame, and the postgame, and all the music and all the announcer, the announcer guy. That was all the same, right? So that one I actually did in 2 hours, right? But it was that first one because I had to assemble everything. It just took forever, and they kept emailing me. They're like, "Is it done yet?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, dude. You don't know what I'm doing here."
We're almost there. Yeah. And then there are times too. Now, in that case, obviously with you, it's a client. And so it's got to be, top notch. But I've done things where, again, kind of a rabbit hole. I remember once I wanted a drum roll sound effect.
Right.
And I'm going out and I'm trying to find a free one. And they're all just horrible and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and after about 3 minutes, I was like, wait a minute. let's go to some place that actually has sound samples. So I went out to, it's not Theme Forest, it's Sound, Audio Jungle. Why couldn't I remember that? Audio Jungle,
right.
AudioJungle.net. Went out there, typed in drum roll, and heard a perfect one. It was like $3. So it's not super cheap, but on the other hand, it's like, yes, but I'm not going to spend 20 minutes looking for a drum roll.
Right.
It's like I found one, and so I always say you're going to pay for things in either time or money. In that case, I was like, I need to sleep. Let's pay for this one in money, I'll get the time later. So that's another thing you can do that'll just, it's a disaster.
Yeah. All right. So how on your computer, how do you organize your files and folders? Do you do anything?
Yes.
Just do the simplest way, or tell us how you do it.
Yeah. So I have a folder just called podcasts. And then in that folder, there are folders with the names of my shows. So if I, were to go, I'm actually doing this live. Like if I click on that, I see School of Podcasting, I see Podcast Rodeo Show, et cetera, et cetera. And so if I click on the Podcast Rodeo Show, I can see that there is a folder there. One is called Production. And this is where I have my intro, my outro, any kind of, in my case, I have a buzzer, I have a horse whinny. There are a couple things that I probably use on every single episode, or I might. And so I've got an episode folder as well. So I've got my production folder, I've got my episode folder. Now in the episode folder, I'm a big fan of subfolders. So in the episode folder or episodes, there's a folder called Episode 1. And so for that show, any clip I've pulled in or any audio or things like that, anything, if for some reason the world blows up and I lose Episode 1, I've got everything I need to recreate it in the Episode 1 folder.
Got it.
And so that's there. And then I have a folder called Finish. And that's where I've taken everything out of that, whatever's in that episode, and I export it to, my MP3 file. And that's pretty much it. So I've got my production folder, my episode folder, and my Finish folder. I might have, in some cases, I'll have an images folder. So if I'm doing different things like that, but most of the time now I just put the images in the episode. And then if I have my album art, I'll put that in the production folder. And where that really comes in handy, the production one, is if I do go on the road, all I have to do is copy the production folder, and I've got everything I need to make a podcast. I just have to record on something.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I do something similar, probably even a little more simpler than you, but very similar to what you're doing. How about backing up? Where do you back up audio?
Yeah, most of my stuff goes to Dropbox. And again, what I'll do is I will take out, because a lot of times I'll have the original interview, and I'll keep that one again. So if I ever need to go back, I've got the original one. And if there are any different edit versions of that, I'll probably lose those, and I'll keep the final edited version. So I've got the original version and the one that went in the podcast, and any interim in between I delete. And it's kind of stupid because hard drives are so cheap now, and you get 80 terabytes for a nickel. But nonetheless, I don't want to fill up my drive, so I'll get rid of those. And like with Ask the Podcast Coach, I will download the video, and in some cases I'll do stuff with that. But once I'm done with it, I've got the video on YouTube, so I'm using YouTube as a backup. But most of my backup stuff is on, I have it in two places. I have it on Dropbox, and then I use Backblaze, which is a thing that just backs up pretty much everything on my computer. And it's dirt cheap, and I've been using them for years, and I love it because I just found this out. I was moving things to Dropbox, and I said, you know what, this is stupid. I'm moving them all in their kind of native format. Why don't I just zip all these files together, and then I'll throw the zip file on Dropbox. It'll make it easier, and yada, yada, yada. And I didn't realize that one of the reasons I was doing this is my hard drive was kind of getting full. I didn't realize how full it was.
Right.
And in the process of making the zip file, it's like, no, there's not enough room. And in the process of doing that, it hosed all the files I was trying to zip.
No!
Yeah. So I lost 6 months of Ask the Podcast Coach. Now, the good thing is it's on Backblaze. So I was able to go to Backblaze and say, hey, I need this folder, and that folder, put it back down on my computer. So I was saved. But I didn't realize that, and I've got, I think, at the time it was terabytes. I think I have a 2 terabyte hard drive in my computer. But when you start throwing videos on it, especially I make a lot of videos for the school of podcasting, that 2 terabytes will get eaten up quickly.
Yeah. All right. So Dropbox, I actually have the 1 terabyte plan. I think it's $99 a year, but I'm almost full up on that. So what is like? How does Backblaze work? Is there a limit of space or something?
No, I'm not really sure what. It's one of those things. I've set it up so long ago. I just know you basically go into it. It's super cheap. I want to say it's like $5 a month. And the thing I like about it is it also backs up external hard drives, which I still kind of go, that's not a good business plan. But it's one of those things. What it does is they recommend, like, don't back up your program files, because in theory,
right.
If it's Microsoft Office, you've already got a backup. It's called Microsoft.
Right.
So they kind of say, why don't you just back up your finished products and things like that? So
yeah, even if you back up the operating system that's on your computer that's already installed, even if your computer blows up, you can't use those files to reinstall it. You need the install files, right? That's all you need.
Yeah. So, and it basically, when you first install it, it takes forever. And there's actually a setting where you can say, like, I remember I would go to bed, and I would say, okay, throttle up, go to town, guys, while I'm sleeping. And then I would wake up and say, okay, bring it back down, because it uses up bandwidth.
Right.
And so, and after a while, it took like a week to back up everything. But as I look at this, I have 727 files that haven't been backed up because I've been working this morning. But I have 462,000 files backed up to the cloud, and it just backs up in the
background,
behind the scenes. Yeah.
That's interesting. That brings up the whole net neutrality thing, which happened yesterday or today or whatever.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Do you have any high level thoughts on that?
I'm just worried. You know what I mean? Because now, literally, the government could say, I don't like the no agenda show. They rip us apart. Let's make it hard for them to deliver their show. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's one of those things where, we can go over the edge with freedom of speech and things like that. But I'm like, and you can say, no, I'm not sure what they're saying the positive version of this is. I just know, to me, it's like, anything that's like, you leave that door cracked, and next thing you know, it's cracked a little more.
Yeah.
It's like so I'm a little worried about that.
I did see a tweet from Comcast this morning, that said, it was like a tweet that basically said, we are going to help fight to keep net neutrality, and we're not going to throttle people. We're not going to, they just made a big PR statement that they're on the side of the people. And I hope that's true. But you never know what posturing is going on.
Exactly. So we'll see. It'll be fun.
All right. Restarting and rebooting your computer. How often do you do that?
If I'm smart, once a week. I usually do it on Saturday, just again, because I'm doing a live show. And so I want everything to, be as fresh as I can, because there's nothing like completely tanking in front of a live audience. So I usually do it on Saturday. Same thing. I will go in, and I use a great website called ManageWP, and you install a plugin on all your websites, and then you can basically manage them from one console. So I log into ManageWP, and it'll say, hey, you've got 6 plugins and 1 theme that need updated. And you just click a button and say, do it. And it'll back up your websites if you want it to. That's where I found out that my one app was way outdated, because it's like, hey, you have a security warning on your one website. And I was like, really? And I was like, oh, okay. So I love that. I do that every Saturday. There are a bunch of things I do on like Saturday morning. Is kind of like my checkbox of like, let's make sure that's backed up, that's done, everything's updated. It's like my Saturday morning routine.
That's cool. I actually shut down everything every night. So when I'm done for the day, done for the night, I literally shut down everything, and I unplug it. And part of the reason is because I believe Colorado Springs is the second. Well, it gets the second most lightning strikes in the whole United States.
Wow.
Now, I literally haven't, I don't even know if I've seen a couple lightning strikes here, but nothing, not more than New Jersey. So I think it might be like a lot of, maybe in the mountains they get a lot of lightning, but not in the city of Colorado Springs. But anyway, I thought, you know what, I'll just shut everything down and unplug it. So if lightning does strike, then it won't fry my entire studio.
Yeah. Well, I've got three of the Super Jumbo Deluxe surge protectors that actually have a battery in them.
Oh,
so it's not a surge protector. It's like they call it a line leveler. So it actually, the electricity comes in, they work their magic mojo, and you get this nice non-spiking thing. And then the beautiful thing is if the power ever does go out, everything beeps, and I have about 5 minutes to shut down my computer versus just poof, and you reboot it and Windows yells at you and things like that. So that's just something that I've had. I blew up a modem once. All I did was I turned on a hairdryer and it popped a fuse. And in the process of doing that, my modem went bye-bye. So I went out and bought this line leveler, and they're not cheap. They're like $70, but I was like, on the other hand, I've got thousands of dollars of equipment plugged into this stuff. So that's how I kind of, that's why I leave it on at night, I guess. Otherwise, I'd probably be right there with you and turn them off at night.
Right. So it's called a line leveler. So it's kind of like a macho surge protector kind of thing.
Yeah. And there's some of them, it's got like, as I look at my 7 different things plugged into it. And some of those have battery backup, and then some of them are just, surge protected on a major scale.
Got it. And what about video? Ask the Podcast Coach is video. And by the way, I remember being on your show, it was like maybe a couple months ago, and you you have that clip of the ladies singing about the Heil PR40. That's my favorite sound clip ever.
That is the lovely Emily from the Story Behind podcast. She did that for me. But yeah, I didn't do anything super crazy. I mean, there are people that buy DSLR cameras and things like that. I just have it's a Logitech C920. And then from what I've seen, most of video, it's lighting. And of course, you still have to have good audio. But I just bought, I want to say it has the word cowboy in it, some sort of word cowboy lighting. They're really cheap. And the stands, if you sneeze on them hard enough, will fall over. So I have to be really, really careful with them. But they have the little curly Q kind of lights in them. And it's interesting because the office I have is just a small bedroom. And when I close the door to keep the cat out and whack these lights on, I'm a sweaty pig in about 45 minutes. So it gets, so I'm always happy because Saturday morning, usually I got some natural light coming in my window and I'll turn those on. But hopefully maybe Santa will bring me some cool LED lights coming in, because things have changed in the 3 years I've done the show, that I'm kind of like, I would like to have these stands out here, because they take up a good, 20% of my audience, these big, because they have to be very wide, otherwise they tip over.
Right.
And I was in Daniel J. Lewis's office about a month ago, and he's got these cool little boxes of LEDs that are super bright. And I was like, I got to get those because A, they're not that hot. B, they take up half the room. And I've, it's that whole gear acquisition syndrome. I was like, ooh, looky, I got to get me those. So.
Yeah, I just bought one of those little LED, little rectangle lights because I think Todd Cochran put it on, like for Black Friday. Todd Cochran put something online, was like, hey, this one's on sale for, I think it was like $150, but normally like $700. So I was like, you know what? I got it. And I actually used it last night because I was on the This Week in Radio Tech. I was on that show with Kirk Harnack. So that was awesome. And I used my new LED lights, and it's really good. Hey, you mentioned the word cowboy, and I want to go back to your podcast Rodeo Show, where you listen to other shows and sort of critique them in real time and see how long you can hang on to that beast. Do you have to get their permission to play their show?
In theory, depends on I guess how they release their show. I did have somebody that left me it was one of the first shows I reviewed, and it wasn't very good. And he put in his iTunes 1-star review that this was illegal. And I went, well, until I get a letter from a lawyer, I'm still doing it. Because it is just my opinion. But in theory, depending on what license they've put it out at, I don't know, to be honest with you.
Well, I know.
Probably not.
I recently looked up this whole thing about fair use and can you use a YouTube, can you play audio from a YouTube video? And anything you look up with fair use, is this legal or illegal? You'll never get an answer. And I guarantee even if you talk to 5 lawyers, they're not going to give you a black and white answer, yes or no. Because you know how it is in the legal system. Anyone can sue you at any time. They don't have to be right.
Yeah.
They just have to sue you.
Well, and the thing with fair use, you have to remember, fair use is the defense you use when you're in court.
Right.
And the last time I was in court, it's never cheap when you go into the legal system. So I try to avoid it. But, and that's why I try to make any kind of feedback that's not great, I try to be as constructive as possible. You know, It's not just like, this is the worst thing I've ever, you know, I try to be, because number one, you got to remember there is a person on the other side of that microphone, and it's, you know, I really thought I would find more good podcasts, and I'm not.
Yeah. Well, I actually have never heard that show, so now I need to go listen to that. But looks like you only started it, you know, 6-8 months ago, right?
Yeah, it's I'm using a media hosting company that I literally am probably going to leave in the next month or so, called Pinecast. They're not horrible. They just don't do everything. Like, when I asked the guy, "Are you gonna accept the new iTunes tags?" He was like, "Yes." And I'm like, "Okay, where do I put my episode number in?" And he said, "Oh, you have to be doing a serial podcast." And that's when we went, okay, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Right.
And I asked him if his stats were IAB compliant, and he goes, "Well, we do deduplication." I'm like, "Nope, that's..."
Yeah.
So, you know, not a bad guy. It is probably one guy in his basement, and their stats are a little wonky. And it's, again, I've spent a lot of time to go, yep, just what I thought. Not as good as these other people, so I would probably move them off that. But I just started the podcast just to test that platform, and the test is over, and people keep saying, "No, keep doing it." So, and then I started a thing where I've never played with Fiverr. So if you want to cut in line, and instead of me picking a random podcast, you can pay me $5, and I'll do your show for $5, and we'll listen to it.
Oh, that is cool.
So, and there are months when I'm like, "Hey, look, I made, you know, $40 listen to people's podcasts for 2 minutes." So it's fun.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, but it's a lot of fun.
All right, so I need to tell a little, well, I just need to give an update on my whole buying a new Mac research. I've been researching buying a new computer because the computer I have now is 4 years old, and it still works. Everything's good, but you know how it is. And then I wanted to get a Mac, like a really powerful Mac, because I wanted to use audio hijack and loopback, and I've talked about this on other sessions. So I could do everything in the box, right? Have like 4 people connect and record everybody separately and all that in the box. So I was waiting for the iMac Pro to be released, and it was released yesterday. And when you go to the website and you choose all the best features and bells and whistles, comes out to $13,500.
You are kidding me, right?
I'm not kidding.
You can buy a car for that.
I put it on Facebook, and Drew Smith commented, he's like, "My college education didn't cost that much." Anyway, so I sort of, I went with some lesser features, and it ended up being $8,200, and I'm just like, I just can't do that. I don't think I can do that. So I don't know what I'm going to do now. I don't know. And then I started looking at PCs again, really powerful PCs. And, you can get a really powerful one for $4,000, $4,500. I mean, like literally the most powerful one you can get. And that's not bad. But I'm trying but I wanted to do everything in the box with the Mac. That was the whole allure of this audio hijack and loopback. It's like, I don't need 4 computers and a mixer. I can just bring everybody in on, like, I can have one screen and bring everybody in and record everybody separate. But so anyway, now I don't know what to do.
Ick. Wow.
Right?
I'm still trying to think about $13,000. Oh my goodness.
Oh, by the way, you can choose a 1 terabyte hard drive, a 2 terabyte hard drive, or a 4 terabyte hard drive. Now, and I chose 2, right? But to upgrade from 2 to 4, they were charging $2,000.
That's Barry. Would Barry spend $2,000 to upgrade his hard drive?
No way. You crazy?
Yeah,
and even the guy in the store told me, he's like, "Dude, don't upgrade from 2 to 4 because you can get. I mean, you just get a what do they call it? An external hard drive for 6 terabytes for $100.
Oh, but it wouldn't have the logo on it.
I don't know. I mean, it's a beast of a computer, 18 cores. And I mean, I would love it. I would really love it, but no, I can't. I just can't.
Well, it goes back to what do you want and what do you need? There's always a difference between the two.
And now I think I've literally, in my mind, I've dropped back to to accept the fact that, you know what, maybe I'll wait another year. Like literally, maybe I'll just keep using the computer I have. Why not? Everything works. So anyway.
Yeah. For the shot.
Anyway, Dave Jackson, thanks, man. Thanks for hanging on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, buddy. It's always great to talk to you, and I look forward to seeing you in Florida.
I know. We're going to be in Florida. It's going to be awesome. If you're listening and you're going to be at PodFest in Orlando in February 2018, please send me a message. Let's hang out there. Let's do a little meetup or something. And especially if you're a podcast engineering school alumni, that'd be awesome too. So Dave Jackson, all your info and links are on the website, School of Podcasting. Thanks again, and check out all our other sessions. And I'm late. Sound
great.
Walk away from me where you can play that part so well. Why do you play it out on me now? You like to lose control where it's quite a feeling, isn't it? They're floating, drifting down now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. You react so angry. You change your attitude where you say I just don't get it now. You say your eyes so far away now. Give up on me where so change your game and give away. Say I wouldn't understand now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? Oh yeah, I say now it's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. You react so angry. I want you to know you were never with me. So I've gone over all we've been through. Doesn't seem that long a time now. Things we did